She had dedicated her life to upholding the law, trusting only what she could see with her own eyes, until one fateful night changed everything. What she witnessed in those terrifying moments defied all explanation and led her down a path she never imagined. This is the extraordinary story of how a life-threatening encounter led a police officer to Islam. Sarah Mitchell grew up in Philadelphia, a city rich with American history and diverse communities. From childhood, she had been drawn to justice and order. While other children played at make-believe, Sarah would organize neighborhood patrol watches, making sure the local kids stayed safe during their games. Her mother, a district attorney, had instilled in her a deep respect for the law and those who enforced it. "The law protects everyone equally," her mother would say. "That's what makes it beautiful." These words became Sarah's guiding principle as she navigated her path toward becoming a police officer. America's law enforcement community was challenging, especially for women aspiring to leadership positions. But Sarah was resolute. She excelled through the police academy, graduating at the top of her class while completing additional coursework in criminal psychology. Her exceptional marksmanship and remarkable ability to de-escalate volatile situations distinguished her from her peers, but it was her unwavering commitment to ethical policing that truly set her apart. By 26, Sarah had earned her detective's shield in Philadelphia's busy 15th District, an achievement that usually took officers nearly twice as long. Within 4 years, she was leading her own investigative team, breaking barriers as one of the youngest female detectives to command such respect within the department. Her career took her from drug busts to homicide investigations, from community outreach programs to specialized tactical operations. On paper, Detective Sarah Mitchell had accomplished everything she had set out to do. Her mother beamed with pride at departmental ceremonies. Her commendations lined the walls of her office, and local newspapers frequently featured her team's successful cases. Yet as she returned to her downtown apartment, after grueling shifts, staring at the ceiling, an inexplicable emptiness consumed her thoughts. "Is this really enough?" she would ask herself in the darkness. The thrill of solving cases no longer fulfilled her as it once had. The promotions and accolades seemed increasingly meaningless. There was a void within her that professional success couldn't fill. Sarah had been raised in a nominally Protestant household, attending church services mainly on holidays. While her grandmother had occasionally shared stories from the Bible, spirituality had never been a significant aspect of their family life. Faith was something Sarah associated with victims seeking comfort or perpetrators seeking redemption. Her analytical mind had always prioritized evidence over belief. This perspective began to change unexpectedly during a routine patrol assignment. Sarah's regular partner had taken leave for a family emergency, and her temporary replacement was a reserved, dignified officer named Kareem. During their pre-shift briefing, Sarah noticed Kareem discreetly step aside, face east, and perform what she recognized as Islamic prayer. "Protection ritual before hitting the streets?" Sarah asked with a slight smile. Kareem nodded. "I ask Allah to guide our judgment and protect all those we encounter today." Sarah was curious but said nothing more as they began their patrol. The shift was uneventful until a call came through about an armed robbery in progress at a convenience store in their sector. As first responders, Sarah and Kareem arrived to find a volatile situation. A desperate man waving a gun, 5 terrified hostages, and the store owner bleeding from what appeared to be a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Sarah took command, calling for backup and a medical team while assessing entry points. But before additional units could arrive, the situation escalated. The perpetrator, increasingly agitated and likely under the influence of narcotics, began threatening to execute hostages. "We can't wait," Sarah whispered to Kareem. "That owner needs immediate medical attention, and this guy is becoming more unstable by the second." They coordinated a tactical approach, with Sarah taking the lead while Kareem covered her. As she identified herself as law enforcement and began negotiations, the perpetrator suddenly turned his weapon toward an elderly woman cowering behind a display. Everything that followed happened in terrifying slow motion. Sarah lunged forward to position herself between the gunman and his intended victim. The perpetrator fired 3 times at point-blank range. Sarah felt the impact as bullets struck her chest, the force knocking her backward. Her protective vest absorbed some of the damage, but she knew immediately that at least one bullet had penetrated. Searing pain engulfed her as she collapsed. Through fading consciousness, she was vaguely aware of Karim neutralizing the threat and securing the scene. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Sarah realized with clinical detachment that her injuries were likely fatal. The world began to darken around the edges. In those moments between life and death, something extraordinary happened. Karim knelt beside her, pressing his hands against her wounds to slow the bleeding, while quietly reciting something in Arabic. Despite never having studied the language, Sarah found that she somehow understood the meaning. There is no God but God, and in God alone we place our trust. As these words washed over her, Sarah experienced something impossible. The excruciating pain suddenly subsided, replaced by a profound warmth that seemed to emanate from within her chest. More remarkably, she could actually feel her damaged tissues responding, as if guided by an invisible force. The bleeding slowed visibly, confounding medical personnel who arrived moments later. "That's impossible," the paramedic whispered, checking Sarah's vitals. By all medical understanding, the trajectory of the bullet should have caused catastrophic damage to her heart and lungs. Yet somehow, the bullet had changed course inside her body, missing vital organs by millimeters. "With Allah, nothing is impossible," Karim said quietly as they loaded Sarah into the ambulance. During her recovery at Philadelphia General Hospital, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had occurred. The medical impossibility of her survival haunted her thoughts. Multiple surgeons had used the word miracle when discussing her case, showing her scans that defied medical explanation. She found herself asking to see Karim before he completed his shift rotation. "The words you said when I was injured, what were they?" "Verses from Surah At-Tawbah and Surah Al-Imran," he explained. "They speak of Allah's protection and healing power." Hesitantly, Sarah asked, "Could you recommend something for me to read?" "About Islam?" Karim smiled warmly and suggested she begin with an English translation of the Quran, offering to connect her with a knowledgeable teacher named Aisha, who worked as a professor at Temple University. During her medical leave, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the Quran's pages. What began as intellectual curiosity evolved into something deeper. The concept of Tawheed, the absolute oneness of God, resonated with her analytical mind in unexpected ways. There was a logical consistency to it that appealed to her detective's instinct for coherent narratives. Aisha, who had converted to Islam herself 15 years earlier after a career in academia, became Sarah's guide. Their discussions ranged from theological concepts to practical aspects of Muslim life. Aisha never pressured Sarah. She simply answered questions and shared her own experiences. "Islam doesn't ask you to abandon critical thinking," Aisha explained during one meeting. "It invites you to use your intellect to recognize patterns of divine wisdom in both scripture and creation." This approach appealed to Sarah, who had always valued evidence and logical deduction. She began researching historical and forensic aspects of Islamic texts, surprised to find ethical frameworks for criminal justice that aligned with many modern progressive ideals she herself advocated within her department. Despite her growing interest, Sarah kept her spiritual exploration private. As a woman in a male-dominated profession who had worked tirelessly to earn respect, she worried about colleagues' reactions. Would they question her objectivity if she embraced a faith that many Americans misunderstood? 4 months after the shooting incident, Sarah had returned to active duty when she experienced another remarkable event. Responding to reports of a child abduction, she and her team tracked the suspect to an abandoned warehouse district. As they prepared to enter the primary target building, Sarah felt an overwhelming and inexplicable urge to check a different structure, one that wasn't even on their tactical map. In that moment of confusion, Sarah found herself whispering, "Bismillah," words she had read in the Quran. Immediately, she experienced what she could only describe as a form of guidance. Not a voice, but an unmistakable certainty about which building contained the missing child. Against protocol and her commander's direction, Sarah insisted they redirect the operation. Her partner, Jackson, was bewildered. "Mitchell, what are you doing? All the evidence points to Building A." Sarah had no logical explanation for her certainty. "Trust me, Jackson. The child is in Building C, 3rd floor, eastern corner." The tactical team, respecting Sarah's record and instincts, diverted as she suggested. They found the 6-year-old victim exactly where Sarah had indicated, minutes before the building's scheduled demolition. The kidnapper was apprehended, attempting to flee through a service exit. Later, when her commander demanded an explanation for her breach of protocol, Sarah couldn't provide a satisfactory answer. "I just knew," was all she could say. The department's internal review ultimately classified it as exceptional investigative intuition, but Sarah recognized it as something beyond natural explanation. This second inexplicable event deepened Sarah's conviction that there were forces beyond evidential reasoning. Upon returning home, she intensified her studies of Islam, now incorporating prayers into her daily routine. The emptiness that had plagued her for years began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of purpose and connection. While on a conference trip to Washington, D.C., Sarah made an impromptu decision to visit the Islamic Center. Though not yet officially Muslim, she felt drawn to experience congregational prayer. Standing among worshipers during Friday prayers, listening to the imam speak about justice and mercy as intertwined values, tears streamed down her face. In that moment, surrounded by strangers yet feeling profoundly connected to them all, Sarah knew she had found what she had been searching for. Upon returning to Philadelphia, Sarah formally embraced Islam by pronouncing the Shahada in Aisha's presence and a small gathering of Muslim women. "Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah." The declaration felt both monumental and natural, as if she was finally acknowledging a truth her heart had already recognized. Sarah's conversion brought challenges. Her mother worried that this was a traumatic response to her near-death experience. Some colleagues became distant, making assumptions about her based on political headlines rather than personal interaction. The department's uniform requirements conflicted with her desire to dress more modestly. Yet for every challenge, there seemed to be unexpected support. Her grandmother, though devoutly Christian herself, reminded everyone that faith was a personal journey to be respected. The police commissioner, citing diversity initiatives, approved her request for uniform modifications. And numerous community members, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, expressed appreciation for seeing a visibly Muslim woman in law enforcement, breaking stereotypes with every patrol. Sarah found that Islam enhanced rather than hindered her professional life. The discipline of 5 daily prayers helped structure her shifts. Fasting during Ramadan increased her empathy for those struggling with addiction and hunger. Most importantly, the Islamic emphasis on justice tempered with mercy transformed her approach to policing. Each intervention became not just enforcement of the law, but an opportunity to embody divine attributes of justice and compassion. As months passed, Sarah became known not just as an excellent detective, but as someone whose balanced approach to law enforcement inspired those around her. Her practice of brief meditation before difficult operations became as much a part of her preparation as checking her equipment. During a particularly tense hostage negotiation with a barricaded suspect, her commander remarked on her effectiveness. "How do you stay so centered when dealing with someone that volatile?" he asked as they successfully concluded the operation without casualties. Sarah smiled slightly. "I remember that while I must uphold the law, I'm not the ultimate judge of anyone. There's balance in seeking justice while remembering we all answer to a higher authority." What had begun as a career motivated by community protection had transformed into something deeper, a vocation through which Sarah could exemplify the values of her faith: justice, protection, compassion, and service. 2 years after her conversion, Sarah established a community outreach program specifically designed to bridge divides between law enforcement and marginalized communities, particularly immigrant populations. She spoke at mosques, churches, and synagogues about ethical policing and community partnership, demonstrating that being Muslim and being a dedicated American law enforcement officer were perfectly compatible. "Faith doesn't compromise your oath to serve and protect," she would tell new officers. "It reinforces it by reminding you of the sacred trust placed in your hands." On the first anniversary of the shooting incident, Sarah visited the convenience store where her life had changed. She brought flowers for the elderly woman she had protected and spoke with the owner, who had also survived his injuries. When he asked why she had been willing to risk her life for strangers, Sarah's answer came from both her professional code and her faith. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that saving one life is as if you've saved all of humanity, she explained. "I was just doing what any officer, any human, should do." Life as a Muslim woman in American law enforcement continued to present challenges. Media interviews sometimes focused more on her hijab than her case clearance rate. Security briefings occasionally included uncomfortable generalizations about Muslim communities. But Sarah faced each situation with dignity and intelligence, viewing these moments as opportunities to change perceptions through her professionalism and character. Her approach to criminal investigation evolved as well. While she remained committed to evidence-based policing, she developed a reputation for seeing patterns others missed. Colleagues joked about her sixth sense, unaware that Sarah's Islamic practices of reflection and mindfulness had sharpened her already formidable observational skills. "Islam taught me to look beyond the obvious," Sarah explained to a rookie detective struggling with a challenging case. "Sometimes what isn't present tells you more than what is." The spiritual principles that guided her work extended to her treatment of both victims and perpetrators. She became known for her compassionate approach to victims of crime, ensuring they receive support beyond the immediate investigation. Yet she was equally recognized for treating suspects with dignity, regardless of their alleged crimes. A local journalist once asked why she showed such respect to individuals accused of terrible offenses. "My faith teaches me that justice must never abandon mercy," Sarah replied. "Every person has the capacity for redemption. My job is to gather evidence and uphold the law, not to strip anyone of their humanity." This balanced approach led to something unexpected: higher rates of cooperation from informants and more reliable testimony from witnesses. People sensed that Detective Mitchell sought truth rather than merely arrests, and this perception made them more willing to assist her investigations. 3 years into her life as a Muslim, Sarah faced her greatest professional test when she was assigned to lead a sensitive investigation involving a Muslim suspect accused of domestic terrorism. The case attracted national attention, with some questioning whether her faith would compromise her objectivity. Sarah approached the case with characteristic thoroughness, following evidence meticulously. When that evidence revealed the suspect's innocence and pointed instead to an anti-Muslim hate group attempting to frame him, she pursued the new suspects with equal vigor, ultimately preventing a planned attack targeting a local mosque. At the press conference following the arrests, a reporter asked pointedly if her faith had influenced the investigation's direction. "My faith influences who I am, just as your experiences influence you," Sarah responded calmly. "But evidence is evidence. As investigators, we follow facts, not preferences. The truth led us here, nothing else." The case became a landmark example of professional integrity, transcending personal identity, earning Sarah commendations from both the department and the FBI. More importantly to her, it demonstrated that being visibly Muslim in public service could be an asset rather than a liability. Sarah's journey from secular law enforcement officer to devout Muslim detective became a quiet inspiration within both communities she now called home. For her fellow officers, she exemplified the possibility of bringing one's whole self to the demanding work of policing. For the Muslim community, she represented the compatibility of American civic engagement with Islamic values. On the 5th anniversary of the shooting incident, Sarah organized a community safety workshop at the same convenience store, bringing together local businesses, residents, and police officers. As she demonstrated safety protocols and conflict de-escalation techniques, she caught glimpses of Kareem in the audience, now a sergeant himself, nodding approvingly. The journey into law enforcement taught me how to protect others using physical means, Sarah reflected in her journal that evening. But the journey to faith taught me why that protection matters, because every soul is precious in Allah's sight. Each life preserved is not just a professional success, but a fulfilled divine trust. Throughout her continuing career, Sarah maintained that the two most essential tools in policing were not found on any duty belt. They were the compass of faith that directed her toward her Creator, and the map of Islamic teachings that guided her through complex ethical terrain. With these tools, she navigated not just through Philadelphia's challenging streets, but toward a more perfect justice, finding in each case a reflection of the ultimate balance between justice and mercy. As years passed, Sarah's story quietly inspired a new generation of American Muslims to consider careers in public service. Young women would approach her after community events, asking how to balance faith with careers in law enforcement, medicine, or politics. Islam doesn't ask us to withdraw from society, she would tell them. It calls us to be witnesses for justice and mercy within it. Your presence in these spaces isn't just permitted, it's needed. At a national police conference where she presented on community-based policing strategies, Sarah was approached by an elderly officer nearing retirement. "I've been watching your career," he admitted. "When I first heard about you, I had preconceptions. I was wrong. You've made me reconsider a lot of what I thought I knew." These moments of connection and changed hearts meant more to Sarah than any formal recognition. She had learned that sometimes the most powerful dawah, invitation to understand Islam, came not through words but through living example. On a cool autumn evening, patrolling the same streets where she had begun her career, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her from skepticism to faith. The night was quiet, the radio silent, and the city peaceful under a crescent moon. In such moments, she felt closest to her purpose, a guardian of public safety and a servant of divine will, the two roles now inseparable in her heart. "Alhamdulillah," she whispered, the Arabic praise now as natural to her as breathing. "All praise belongs to God." The patrol car continued through Philadelphia's streets, its path illuminated not just by headlights, but by the light of faith that had transformed an ordinary police officer's life through an extraordinary miracle.